You turn that.
Oh, sorry.
I got it.
That's a good one too.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody to the October meeting of the Delaware Astronomical Society. We got a fun and exciting program for you this evening. First of all, we got a couple of announcements. First item, I think Bob has something to say about the renewals for your membership.
Yeah,
You can just
getting
talk.
close to November 1st, and that's when we start our annual dues collection for the 2023 year. Our dues remain $30 for the year. Hopefully, everybody got an email from the DOS Mount Cuba Gmail account yesterday as a reminder. It has a couple different ways of paying for the dues. You can send it directly to PayPal and use the DOS Mount Cuba at gmail.com address, or there's a link that you can click and sign in that way. I believe that one you don't have to have a PayPal account. I think you can use a credit card for that one to pay through that, or you can use PayPal. You can mail it to me. That's an option. And now that we're meeting back in person again, you can make payments at these types of meetings or workshops, and you can make it to any board member if I'm not around. So
Cash or check in person,
cash,
right?
check, money order, whatever.
Yeah. Bitcoin.
We appreciate that they go a long way to making our program successful each year, and so we encourage you to renew. Thanks.
Wonderful. All right, thank you, Bob. And just a quick announcement, the AP SIG for this month is canceled. Do you have any information about the book club, Mary?
Yes, I do.
Great.
Our next meeting is on Thursday, October the 27th via Zoom at 7 p.m. We'll be reading Spacesuit, Fashioning Apollo by Nicholas Dumas-Chaux. It's a wonderful book, 21 chapters dedicated to the 21 layers of the spacesuit. Delaware has a strong connection to the NASA spacesuits for Apollo via the ILC Corporation of Dover. So it's very much a Delaware story. Nicholas is slated to join us from MIT, although he is serving currently on the search committee to find a new president for MIT. Dr. Reif is resigning after a 10-year stint, and so the timing may change on the meeting. Our November read will be Copenhagen by Michael Frayn, a play, something different, and it's a tip of the hat to mark the 100th anniversary of Niels Bohr's Nobel Prize Award. And just this week, we have been asked to write a review of a newly published book called Public Astronomy, Los Angeles Style by David Dvorkin and E.C. Krupp. E.C. Krupp, Ed Krupp, is the director of the Griffiths Observatory. And it's only 130 pages. The cover is absolutely as cool as you can think of LA style being. And it's supposed to be a wonderful read. And our review will be published in the History of Astronomy Journal, which coincidentally was a journal which was started in 1970 by Michael Hoskins, who was the leading expert on the Herschels and was friends with Lynn King.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other updates about anything? Before I move on?
Did you want to talk about handbooks?
Oh, yeah.
Here, let me turn the camera.
Coming out there.
Back to the center.
I put a thing out on the IO groups about the
You can see.
observer's handbook.
Actually, kind of nice.
I need at least 10 in order to get free shipping. They do give you a discount if you get it through the link. So I don't have the price yet. I have to look that up. But for that.
Cool.
Great. Thank you very much.
And again, that actually gets handled directly through Lynn, not through the
Yeah.
club. So
Right, that I do that. I get them sent
that's-
to me and then we distribute them out.
appreciate that you do that, Lynn.
Same thing as the calendar.
Wonderful. Anyone else have any
I
updates?
can say something about the dinner meeting.
Sure, by all means.
Yeah,
There you
so, for DAS members that have been around, geez, long enough, we'll remember that up until the pandemic hit, we would hold our annual dinner meeting in May of every year. For the past bunch of years, what we would do is we would actually go offsite. For the past bunch of years, for maybe the last 2 or 3 years, we held it at a gorgeous church, not terribly far from here. I guess that would be Greenville. So we go offsite. And the reason for that is the meeting is preceded by a dinner, hence the dinner meeting. And then we will sometimes do awards / slideshow presentations. And we usually bring in a, I don't know the right way to describe it, but a really good speaker. We, try to, usually bring in somebody from NASA or something like that. And for those of us that have been, it ends up being a really, really nice meeting. I forget what we charged. It was 20 or 30 bucks. And I want to say it might have been as cheap as 20. We very intentionally tried to keep the cost very low. And you got fed a really, really nice meal, had a really, really nice event, and heard a really great talk. We also try to keep the talk at a level that would encourage spouses, friends, family, neighbors, bosses, mailmen, whoever, to come and join us for that evening. And often the case that would happen. Because again, it ends up being just a very, very nice, that's another reason why we take the meeting off-site. So then the pandemic hit and we skipped that for 3 years in a row. And I know for a number of us that really bummed us out because it was a really neat event. Reading the tea leaves at this point, it certainly seems likely that we could hold the dinner meeting. But we're not 100% certain, and no commitment obviously needs to be made at this point. But one question would be, if we were to hold the meeting, how many people would turn up? The two sides of the coin, it's really, really wonderful that with Zoom, we can do this hybrid format and accommodate people that are maybe further away or still uncomfortable being in groups of people. But the flip side is it means the numbers in person are a little bit lower. Which again, no problem there. So what I'm thinking, we don't really need to start making any really hard commitments on the dinner meeting until like January or February. So in the meantime, what I'm thinking I'm going to do is sometime in the next, let's say 2 weeks, we're probably just going to put out a very simple survey to get a sense, very simple. If we were to hold the dinner meeting, would people likely show up for it? And don't think of it as a commitment. We're just trying to get a sense of what the interest level would be. Obviously, a lot could happen between now and May. We understand that. But given where we're at right now, we probably have a number of people that have joined us in the past 3 years that may have never been to a dinner meeting. So if anyone's curious about what the dinner meeting is all about beyond what I just described, by all means, reach out to a board member. If anyone has any strong opinions about having a dinner meeting outside of a survey, feel free to send me or the board an email like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do a dinner meeting again, or no way in heck would I ever go to one. I mean, whatever your opinion is, or again, feel free to share that with us because we are certainly in the contemplating phase right now. So anyhow, the first step is keep your eyes open for the survey, which is simply going to be polling whether or not you would consider coming to the dinner meeting in May of 2023.
Very nice. All right, anyone else with any announcements or anything that we haven't addressed? All right, so a little bit later in the meeting, we're going to be giving a tour of some telescopes. And at that time, I'll tell you guys a little bit about some other things that we're working on in terms of loaning gear and other stuff like that. So I'll wait to talk about that till later. So if there's no further announcements, Jeff, you can get started with the program.
Great. Yeah, so actually tonight we're going a little high-tech, low-tech. We are doing Zoom, but there's actually going to be no PowerPoint tonight because back in the 1800s, there was. 1700s, I mean, I'll get it right one of these days, Lynn. Back in the 1700s, there was no PowerPoint. And if people are wondering why that's important. Yeah, that's not even power, much less point. Tonight, our speaker is actually going to be DAS's own Lynn King, who is going to be giving us a talk about the life of Carolyn Herschel. And where would you like to stand? Would you make yourself comfortable, and that works, and we'll get the camera. So as we now notice, Lynn has joined us, and not only, so we don't have Lynn King tonight, we actually have Carolyn herself in period garb. So Lynn, take it away, all yours.
Before I start, Michael Huskin's name was mentioned. He was my mentor. When I first got into this, I read the Herschel Partnership and emailed him and said, oh, this is what I'm gonna do. And he emails me back and says, that's cool, go for it. So over the years, he was my mentor. I would ask him questions that were off the wall, little questions. There was one question where I said, what's an Abigail? And he said, it's the lowest of the low person in a house. She's lower than a scullery maid. And that's one of the things that Caroline was always worried about. She did not want to become an Abigail. But through Michael, when George Sibley, this is another off the wall thing that happens. George Sibley was doing a documentary on William Herschel. He's over in England and he's interviewing Michael for that documentary. And he's asking Michael, there's a few things I need to finish up my documentary. I need an 18th century house and I need some people. And I don't know. And Michael was, wait a minute, there's this lady over in America. She can help you. And he volunteers me. I get the call from George and go, sure. And then I have to think, okay, now what? That is a totally different talk on how this documentary came into being. And there, if you get this, you get 3 separate little pieces at the end that you get to see. Does anybody here have one?
And Lynn, here's your camera. So if you want,
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
this is a magical device from the future.
I don't know. Well, actually, my nephew John, when he was down at the Cape of Good Hope, researching and finishing up the stars of the Southern Hemisphere, he perfected the process by which you fix the pictures to the paper. Daguerre actually used he never got a patent, and he used that process. And John said, we really ought to use this and take pictures of the sun. So if we think about it, we've done it. So what I will do, okay. Caroline was born in 1750. And she lives to 1848. She has a very long life. She's born in Hanover, Germany. Father Isaac is a musician in the Hanoverian army. She has brothers and one sister, Sophia. She doesn't meet until Sophia comes home and gets married. William is my favorite, or I am his favorite. My mother really didn't like children. So, but when I came along, she figured, now I have a servant for life. So she became her mother's scullery maid servant, indentured servant. As a small child, Isaac would teach his children. He would take his children out on clear nights, show them the sky, teach them the constellations. And during a total eclipse of the sun, he showed us that eclipse in a pool of water. The interest is there. So as I grow up, I'm sent to school. I went to school. I learned to read and write. But when they started to teach math, my mother pulled me out. No, you belong in the kitchen. So I was sent home to be in the kitchen. And I was, as an 8-year-old or 9-year-old, I would write letters for the ladies in the village to their husbands and their sons and their nephews and their relatives that were fighting in the war. This is the 7 Years' War. It would be about 1758, 1759. Go back to your Revolutionary War history. You've got the 7 Years' War going on in England. You've got the French and Indian War going on here. You've got a few other things that are going and starting to bubble up over here. So as I grow up, I catch smallpox, and then when I'm about 10, I get typhus. So my growth is stunted. I'm only about 4'9", about that big. As I grow up, mother always tends to shove me to the side. She doesn't like children. During the war, my sister, who has gotten married, she and her kids would move in. Every time her husband and my father, my brother William, and my brother Jacob would go off to fight, would go off. They were all musicians in the Hanoverian army. So they would go off to the army and they'd be gone for days and months and just terrible. And then dad would come home and he would try to teach me violin, and my mother didn't want me to learn. If I learned French, that was terrible. I could find a job as a governess. I could leave home and mom would be left without her servant. So this is my life. My father is caught in a ditch, a wet ditch during war, and he comes home and never recovers. He eventually dies, and Jacob becomes the head of the household. Jacob's not very nice. He would beat me when I didn't serve things properly. And with this kind of life, William and Alexander have left Hanover to live in England. While in the army, they had gone to England. They've been sent to England, and there William learned English and picked up some books and things and made some contacts. So when he left Hanover and went to England, he could start playing music and composing music and leading music. And Alexander and William decided, our sister's not doing very well. She's 22 years old. She's never going to get married. My father used to say, well, you're not pretty enough to get married. Maybe some older gentleman will take pity on you and marry you. But that never happened. So William and Alexander composed a letter to mom and to Jacob and suggest that I come to live with them. I could help. I have a good hand, and they certainly did need help copying music. So Jacob says, in the beginning, says yes. Then he says no. Then he says yes. Then he says no. And William comes back to Hanover, and Jacob's not there. He's supposed to give me permission to go with him. He's not there. Now what do I do? Mom's going to be left without a servant. So William and Jacob give money to my mother, enough so that she can hire someone to do my job. But before I leave, I have to knit enough ruffles for my brothers and enough cotton stockings for them for the winter, so that they have at least 2 pair. That's one of the things I had to learn as a small child. I learned how to knit so that I could be basically employed by the family to knit stockings or whatever else they needed. And sometimes there was in one apartment, there was a young lady upstairs and she did beadwork. And I would go out early in the morning and she would teach me how to do beadwork. But I couldn't do it to sell it. I had, could only do it for the good of the family. So William comes home and I have to make the decision. Do I stay? Do I go? Well, I really wish I had Jacob's consent, but he's off playing. He's in an orchestra and he's giving a concert. And I decided to go. So William takes me back to England. On our way back, William is showing me the sky, and on one part of it, the carriage toppled over and I lost my hat. That was not good. But a very nice lady at a where we stayed lent me one of her daughter's hats to have. When we finally get to England, the first night, William takes me out to look at the town, and we stop in an optic shop and look in the window. William is beginning to be interested in optics. So as we settle in England and we start music, William is composing. He figures I have a very good voice, so I do sing for him. And I'm copying the music. I become in charge of the chorus mistress, copying music for all the musicians. When I eventually, the first day there, I have to start learning English. I have to start learning math because I'm going to keep the accounts for his house. That's a lot of work. And then I have to start practicing. I have to sit down 5 hours and practice at the harpsichord. Now, my father did teach me enough violin that I can play second fiddle and a quartet, but not as good as my brothers. All of my brothers are musically gifted. Sophia is not, but 5 of her sons are in the court orchestras for Queen Charlotte. So we're all musically inclined in some way. So after a while, William starts getting more interested in optics. And he would get books on optics and take them to bed. And then he decided that he was going to start making optics. And if you lived in William's house, you did what William did. He didn't ask, you just assumed you were going to do it. So you would do it. And he started to teach me. And in my spare time, at this point, I am running the household. I am copying music. I've had to learn English. And so then what we do is he said, all right, in your spare time, I think it might be a good idea if you started observing. So he builds a telescope and sets me up observing. Now he's been teaching me how to grind lenses, make telescopes. And as I'm beginning to figure that, well, maybe I'm not going to be a singer. The last time I sang was a solo in the Messiah. and I was offered a job as a singer, and I told them no, I was going to stay with William because he had rescued me from a life of drudgery. So as I start observing, I start kind of liking it. So we started observing together. And when we started, there were 100 known objects that were listed. We ended up with 2,500 objects when we finished our observing. One of the catalogs that we used was Flamsteed. Everybody used it. He had about 250 objects in there, and I started to make a list of them. And what I did is I listed them. Let me see, write this down. I'll tell you how I did this. Let's see. We moved to a house. When we moved to Datchet, I just moved it. We moved to Datchet. William was sure we would be able to have everything cheaper. Meat was more expensive, eggs was more expensive. And the house had 30 windows. Anybody here know the significance of 30 windows?
Makes it dirty.
Lose a lot of heat, cold.
Taxes.
What?
Taxes.
Right. Back in the 18th century, you had a window tax.
Oh,
You had a window tax.
That's interesting.
That's a significance, right? That's why when you see some of the 18th century houses, maybe the windows are small and they don't have as many. The window tax, they had it here and they had it there. So it was
Gosh.
right. And this particular house, and I'm jumping around a little, but this particular house, I think this is the one where the roof leaked. And when we moved in, we were there 4 months. And His Highness comes to visit. He was in and out of our house all the time. He wanted to see things. This was after William discovered the planet. So anyway, what I did is I had to list. I listed all of them. I listed identified and listed 561 stars that was observed by Flamsteed, but overlooked in the catalog, which should have been not 3,000 stars, but 3,500 stars. I listed the errata and that I noticed. And then each star was given by printed page and line from Flamsteed's observation on which the catalog was based. It was divided into constellations. Within each constellation, the stars were listed by Flamsteed's numbers. Now, the astronomer Royale actually persuaded the Royal Society to pay for a publication of it. And Mr. Maskelyne asked me to add the position of each of the stars of the 561 emitted stars relative to the nearby star. I lost no time in supplying with that. And he got what he wanted. Then I took up-to-date positions for the reference stars from a newly published catalog by the Reverend Francis Walston, calculated coordinates in the emitted stars, arranged them in order in which they crossed the meridian, and gave to Maskelyne in the form he wanted. And then I began, this is later on in life, I began to recalculate all of William's fleet. When we're in Datchet, it would be March 13th, 1781 is the date that just about everything changed. William discovered what he thought was a comet. But when he reported the position to all of the other scientists, they told him it's a planet. So William becomes the first human to discover a planet. Those who are familiar with Rev 4 history, September, the end of September, the beginning of October is the Battle of Yorktown, which is the final largest battle in the American Revolution. It's not the final one. There's still some more years that it goes. So we have a planet that was discovered during the American Revolution. Elizabeth Drinker makes note in her diary, she is a lady in Philadelphia, that Paulson's paper states there's going to be an alignment of planets. And she names the planets: Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and planet Herschel. So over here, they're calling it planet Herschel. They changed the name to Uranus so that it conforms with everything. So William does this, discovers the planet, their lives are changed. William decides that Caroline should, in his spare time, look for things that are interesting. He makes her a telescope and she starts observing. I end up observing eight comets. My first comet, William is not here. And I give my information to the people at the Royal Observatory, and they come to see it. When William gets back, the king tells him, your sister is famous. So King George comes to visit us, brings his entourage of people. Fanny Burney's there. Fanny Burney is an author. She's in the Queen's Court. And she came specifically to see the ladies' first comet, the first ladies' comet. William is offered a position. They're going to give him a salary. He can make up what he loses from writing music by selling telescopes. The house is turned into a telescope making factory. Then on the first floor, we are making, we don't have mirrors. It's, they're called speculum. We're basically making a mirror. Downstairs, we have grinding wheels in one room, and in other rooms, we have other astronomy equipment that's there. And when my brothers come and Alexander comes and Dietrich comes, they're all employed. They help him in the summertime too, because that's their musician, their musical gigs are, they don't have them in the summertime, it's mostly in the wintertime. So they come and they help. When William is gone, I am in charge of all the workmen. William decides he is going to build a 40-foot telescope. It was massive. Again, when William is gone selling telescopes, delivering them, I am in charge of the workmen. William eventually marries a lovely lady, and he ends up having a son, John. John and I become extremely close. I am John's first astronomy teacher. And when John goes down to the Cape of Good Hope, my letters back and forth are 2 scientists talking to each other. We have, we're fortunate to have her memoirs. Good story. When I discovered my last comet, I didn't trust anybody. After 1 hour of sleep, I took the information that I had. I went to the stable, saddled a horse, got on the horse, rode to London. Then I rode onto Greenwich to give my calculations to the Astronomer Royale. They wait with me because the weather's bad and they bring me home. Now, I did this by myself, and those who are familiar with 18th century women, you didn't do that. You didn't go out without an escort, but Caroline goes by herself. I'm trying to think of, December 31st, full of snow on the ground. William is outside. We have sky. Haste, we have sky. In my haste, I run out. And I fall and slip and impale myself on a hook. The telescope has 2 hooks on it. They look like meat hooks. I don't know what they were for. If they have 2 hooks, I fell and I screamed, I am hooked. Everybody comes and they look at me and they're afraid to move me. I got myself off and I treated myself. And 2 weeks later, when Dr. Birdie came, yes, that's Fanny Burney's father. When he came, he said to me, if you'd been in the service, you would have been in hospital for 6 weeks. And I answered him, well, I was so glad that we didn't have sky for 2 nights. So I was ready to go back after 2 nights to help William. And William and I actually suggested to William that he really needs to look at nebula. He's been studying double stars, and he really needs to go up there and look at the nebula because there's things up there he needs to see. And so he started to look at nebula. And I think it was Dietrich. Dietrich was an entomologist. He taught William to look at the world as an entomologist would. And that's why at one point, William studies coral. William could study anything. He would pick up any language, he could pick up any instrument and play it. And he was constantly wanting to learn stuff. And I'm glad that he was there because I got a chance to learn things too. After William died, I decided to go back to Hanover. So I went back to Hanover and spent, I didn't realize, at least 25 more years of my life in Hanover. The king had passed on, Queen Charlotte had died. My friend, Madam Beckdorf, I had met at a millinery class in Hanover as a child. And then I found that she was in Queen Charlotte's court. She had gone back to Hanover. And it was her daughters that helped take care of me towards the end of my life. There's lots and lots of stories that you can take. Are there any questions?
What was the scope that was used to discover Uranus?
I think it was his 20-foot scope. He always would go back to the 20-foot one for doing things. Not much was discovered. Maybe some moons of Saturn, I think, were discovered with the 40-foot. But because of the size, that you think that the reflective thing that they had was a speculum. It's made out of copper and tin. And it tarnished a lot. So you would have to have basically two mirrors. One would tarnish, you take it out, and then you'd have to repolish it while the other one you put back in. But most of the stuff is done with that. And then we would figured out how we could observe, not put the telescope and let the sky pass over the telescope to observe as things would come through. They would come through, you would put it at the meridian, and then you would just watch them float by and observe that way.
Did you feel you were too old to go with John to the Cape of Good Hope to do his observing?
Actually, yes, I was in Hanover when he did that. And I wanted to go so bad. But what we have now they're also in the Herschel Chronicles, that book, but in the book that's her diary, her memoirs, we have their letters. And as I said, there's one letter where it's purely technical. And in the middle of the letters, it's before John gets married, she said, "I'm so sad that your friend is leaving and going to live in another place. It would be nice if you could find someone." And then the next paragraph, she's right back to being technical. And what we think about, everything that goes out of that house, every paper that goes out is in Caroline's hand. There are nights that William discovers, oh, well, when I'm observing, I have to go in and write my observations down. Then I have to go back outside and get basically dark adapted again. Oh, but wait a minute. There's Caroline. So he put Caroline at a window with all of her papers and her star charts and everything. And he would pull on a rope, she'd open the window, he'd shout stuff out to her, she'd write it down, she'd close the window. And there were nights her ink would freeze. And think about some of the other things that they have to do while they're observing. Her ink would freeze. That was one of her biggest worries. The next morning, now understand they're observing till 4 o'clock in the morning. After she goes to bed and gets up, the next morning, she takes all those calculations and makes a fair copy. When this part I like, when William is asking for more money for the big telescope, at the time when he's requesting for more money, he's requesting a salary for Caroline, because she he has 4 workmen, and she does the work of almost 4 workmen. So he's requesting, these are his expenses. 12 men means 12 men for polishing for 6 weeks. They will each drink 1 pint of beer a day. There's also note in the Herschel Chronicles when William is off traveling, he writes back to the housekeeper, which is not Caroline at this time, that he's coming home and would like her to prepare the regular amount of beer to have ready when he comes home. So they're making beer on the premise. This is a different beer that 18th century beer is different than what we know today. There's also what they call small beer, which they would have had also. So you're drinking beer a lot. He needs one man to attend visitors and help at night. Now, usually before this, Caroline is the one that has to entertain people when they come. She gets very annoyed. It bothers her. He needs 2 fires all winter long, at least. 4 or 5 candles per night. And 1 fire day and night just for company. These are some of the things that he needs to do this work. Caroline is left a lot sometimes to entertain people. Because after William discovers the planet, the king is in and out of their house all the time. He's bringing people. They do go over to visit Queen Charlotte and their children, and the king had a lot of children. I think he had like 12 or 13. He had a bunch. And they became very, very friendly. On one night when William is over there and they're in the queen's apartment, and it's raining. And he's supposed to show him the sky. What is he going to do? Well, we've all done this. Because I've done it. He had a very good likeness of Saturn that he put up on a garden wall. And in the apartment, he allowed the princesses to look through the telescope and observe Saturn. We've all done something like that. But there are lots of stories, and usually questions trigger things, all the little stuff. But Caroline is referred to as priestess of the new heavens, my sister in astronomy. One person, I wrote it down, when she discovers her first comet, Neville Maskelyne, who was at the Royal Observatory, he said in a letter, he says, you see, whenever she sweeps in fine weather, nothing can escape her. When she goes back to Hanover, any scientist that is within any distance from Hanover, they come to visit her. She did get a lot of awards and medals, and she always said they should be Williams medals. She always would defer to William as being the one. So, any questions?
How did it happen that William became blind in one eye? Was he observing the sun?
No, William didn't. No, David Rittenhouse fainted when he saw a transit of Mercury. William did not become blind in one eye. I don't think so. He knew how to observe the sun because his father taught him how. Back when he was a child and they observed a solar eclipse, they did it in a tub of water. So he knew not to do that.
Obviously, people on Zoom, it looks like a lot of people are muted, so if anyone on Zoom has questions, feel free to shout it out. Otherwise, Lynn, thank you very much. All right, and the second portion of our program now is Rob. For those of you on Zoom, we actually have most of our lunar telescopes scattered around the perimeter of the room. And, a couple of us were talking and we realized that a lot of these scopes has been kind of tucked away in the storage room and out of sight, out of mind. So we figured we'd take some time and actually go through and give a brief introduction to each of the scopes.
So just so everybody knows, we've been spending a lot of time over the last several years working on improving our equipment, both for loaner equipment and equipment that's in our club observatory. We've talked about the observatory stuff a few times, and we even did a live demonstration of how to use some of our equipment in the observatory at another meeting. But for today, we set up all these scopes, as Jeff was saying, and we're just going to go through a little tour and explain what these different things are, so you guys have some idea of things that you could borrow and learn to use and things like that. So did you want to hold the
Yeah,
camera?
I can be your
somehow?
cameraman.
Because that will help, I think.
Ryan? You did prices right, Mark.
We're gonna try our best to make this work. We'll see what happens.
So you want to start here,
I'll just
Rob?
start over here.
What about these?
We'll come to those. later.
Okay,
All right, so if you can point it over here first,
let's see.
is that,
A minute.
you got?
There we go.
these? There we go. So this first telescope right here was donated by John Case a few years ago. This is an ETX 90 telescope. It's a Maksutov Cassegrain scope. That means it's a complex scope. It's a reflector with a couple different optics in it. It's 90 millimeters, so it's not an enormous scope, but it is fully go-to. And this one is a great scope for beginners. You don't have to use its go-to features. You can just observe through it, or you can use the go-to features to find the things in an easier manner. It does come with a couple of things. We have a case here that it comes in, and there's a couple of things inside of that. It has a tripod that comes along with it, and there's a nice bag that you can put the tripod in so that it's easily transportable. So you can carry this whole thing in 2 shoulders, and it's really easy to carry.
It's probably our lightest piece of loaner
It's
equipment.
extremely portable.
Yeah.
Yep. Likewise, over here, we have a small scope, this Bushnell ball scope. It's a reflector. You get it okay?
Yep.
Okay. And it is a tabletop scope. So you really need to have something for it to sit on to observe, maybe a picnic table or something like that. It is a nice little scope. It's a little bit bigger in aperture than the ETX 90.
It's 4.5
And it is
inch.
Extremely portable. I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe it's 4.5 inches. So extremely portable, great for outreach opportunities and things like that. Also, there's a sun spotter right here. The sun spotter is really great for observing the sunspots of the sun. And we can give you some extra training on that so you know how it works. But the main idea is you just point it toward the sun and it reflects and then projects through a little eyepiece onto this paper. And you can see the sun. It's very nice. And hopefully there's sunspots to observe. But we can give you some training on all the details about how that works.
So we don't want it to go blind.
Yeah. Well, that's nice. With that thing, you're not directly observing the sun.
Yeah, you should not go blind with the sun spotter.
You don't need a tub of water.
So that is one that would require a little bit of extra training, but not a whole lot. The ETX for its go-to capabilities, probably a little bit of extra training, but really not a whole lot. It's pretty straightforward. This is one that requires very little training, and this is our most popular type of scope. It's a beginner job. And I've even taught a 3-year-old how to use it. And he was observing Jupiter and Saturn and Jupiter and Saturn. He just kept going back and forth and he had no trouble operating the scope. It was really quite cool. So this telescope is also fairly easy to transport. There's a big bag that comes along with it right here that holds the scope inside. There's a little eyepiece case that you carry. And the base here has a handle on it. And you can, it's slightly difficult, but you can carry them all at the same time. So it's definitely possible, but very easy scope to use. And we are currently in the process of making a series of videos on how to use this loaner gear so that you can be reminded of all the details about how it works after your training. But this one is our first video, which should be released fairly soon.
And Rod, so we actually have 2 scopes that are this 6-inch. And then we have one that's 8-inch.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we have 3 of these. And they are so popular, 2 of them are on loan right now. So that's the only one we got right now. Continuing in our tour, this is a new acquisition that we got this summer. This is also a Dob. It's an 8-inch, but it has some additional features. It has some setting circles and it has a controller so that you can sync it to the sky and it will tell you what it is pointing at as you point it around the sky. So it can tell you what part of the sky is pointing at. It can tell you some objects and you can connect it to a computer. It's a very nice telescope, but it will require a little additional training. So you know how to use that additional gear that comes along with it. So not quite as simple as that scope, but you could use it without using the setting circles if you chose, and then it would be just like the other ones. Right here, we have one of our binoculars mounted on a binocular tripod. It's a very nice tripod we got, I believe it was 2 years ago now. Is that about right? And it's very nice. It has these handles. It's really easy to use and it's very tall. So you can raise this tripod up so it's this high up in the air and observe what you're trying to observe. It's a very nice piece of equipment. And we do have 3 of those binoculars. They don't require a whole lot of training, but we do need to explain how the tripod works for anyone who wants to borrow them.
Yeah, and these are some nice higher end astronomical binoculars, but typically on the larger end so that they're ones you would probably not want to try to hold by hand. So hence the tripod.
Yeah, they're too big.
Oh, wait, where am I? There I am.
And the magnification is too big and their weight is too big to really hold them by hand. So that's why we do have the tripod. And we have 3 different pair of binoculars that you could borrow. The next item here is a refractor, also something we got recently because we didn't have any good loaner refractors, and this fills that void. So this scope does track the sky, it has a little hand controller that you can use for that purpose. And it is a refractor. I believe it is 127 or 120. It's 120 millimeters. So a little bit bigger than the ETX is for sure. And it comes with no bag yet, but we're about to get one. So we just approved the purchase of bags for this. We're hoping that we can put the tripod in one bag and the scope in the other. So you can put both over your shoulders and you'd be good to go. So that is our hope for that.
I know I'm being shaky, but
All right. The next set of scopes, though, require a lot more training. So the ones we just mentioned, very little training and you're good to go. You can use them no problem. You can borrow them just about any time. The next few we're going to talk about are higher end scopes, and they have more complicated features. So they do require a little bit more training before you can borrow them. The first one right here isn't really used as much as a loaner as it is as an outreach tool. So this often goes to star parties and outreach events at schools. It's used at our picnic and a variety of other things. This is a solar telescope. It is pressure tuned, so you can tune it in precisely on that wavelength that the sun emits, H alpha. So you can get the best view of the prominences and other solar features, and hopefully granulation as well. It does come with this case down here that the scope goes in. It does have a double stack in there so that you can narrow that band gap just a little bit more and get more detail into granulation on the surface of the sun. So it is a nice scope and again requires extra training because it is more complicated to use than the other scope and it is more expensive. So we need to be a little more careful with it and not break it. Right. So it is great for outreach and we can train you if you are interested in learning how to use it or using it at some events. The next one here is our Brandon refractor, and we have it mounted on a CG5 mount at the moment. So both of these were separate pieces of loaner gear. The CG5 is a fully go-to mount, and you could mount a variety of different scopes and cameras and other devices like that on the mount. And you could use it to take astrophotos or go to different objects and observe them visually. And the Brandon was a separate loaner that is a nice high-end refractor that gives very nice views. But I think they kind of go well together. So it could be borrowed together, or you could still borrow it in separate pieces. So if you have your own mount, you could put the Brandon on top of it. Or if you wanted to use the CG5 for your own scope or camera, you could mount that on top of that. So they can be borrowed separately, but I think they do go well together. To make it easier to transport, we have the case here, which will house the mount, and it has straps so that it's fairly easy to wheel around. So that makes it more easily transportable. There's a case down there that the Brandon will go in. And you could possibly carry those at the same time, but there's another thing, and that would be the tripod legs. So I don't think you could carry all 3 boxes at the same time. There's just no way. But you could easily do it in 2 trips, I think. The next item is one of our newer acquisitions. Sydney has spent a lot of time working on this over the last couple weeks, getting this ready for doing observations. This is a Celestron, I believe. It's a C8 telescope, and it's fully go-to. I believe it's called the EVO. Sydney,
Yeah, the Evolution
Yes.
C8, yeah.
did you want to say anything more about it?
Oh, it's an Evolution C8. It's got its own Wi-Fi. Yeah. Yeah, it's an Evolution C8, of course, manufactured by Celestron. One good feature about it, of course, being aside from being go-to, is it's got its own Wi-Fi access point, so that you can use the Sky Portal app that Celestron provides. You can install that on your phone, and then you can use that to sync with the telescope, and then you can align the telescope using the Sky Portal app. And from there, you can just pick on the app, whatever you want to observe, and it's gonna automatically go to where you point it to. That's one very good feature about that one. And of course, it got a nice carrying case and the tripod legs, which gonna make it a bit easier to move around, actually. Yeah, it's a joy to use.
So what Sydney was just mentioning, this case is actually quite nice for loaning because it has wheels on it and it's very easy to carry it out. Actually, we were noting that the other night when we were setting it up. It was very easy to take this scope out. I've been wanting to
Because
get.
it is a bit heavy, right, Rob?
Yeah, it's not bad when it's on wheels.
Exactly, yeah.
I've been hoping to get a go-to loaner that was a decent go-to as a loaner scope. And this one does pretty well fit the bill because it's easy with the wheels. Unfortunately, we don't have a bag or anything for the tripod, but you can actually carry those together and it does work. Because of course, this fits in that case with everything, and that's just one separate piece. This scope does require some extra training, of course. It is a lot more complicated than almost everything else over there, except this one here. And so it would require extra training, and it's a fairly expensive scope, so we would need to help you out getting ready to use it. We did prepare, or actually Sydney did prepare a very nice set of slides on how to use the scope. And as I was saying before, we're going to make a video series on how to use all these scopes. So after you get your training on how to use it, you can review the video for extra guidance. Does anybody have any questions about the gear that we discussed here?
And another point to make is pretty much most of these scopes, whether if we didn't show it, come with an accessory box that will usually have a set of eyepieces and a finder or a Telrad or a red dot or whatever else you might need. And we tried to equip them all pretty comprehensively. So we might not have shown that for every single scope, but they're all pretty well completely equipped. So especially for some of these beginner Dobbs and the refractor, it's got every single thing you need to be observing. So
yeah, some of the scopes actually have a couple eyepieces that come in their case, such as the solar scope here. There's a special zoom eyepiece that comes with that. And back there, the ETX has a couple eyepiece holes in it, so the eyepieces are in there. But like the Dobbs, they all have their own little case. And we tried to make it a similar kit for all of them, so that they all have the same kinds of eyepieces in the box. So these should pretty much have their own sets of eyepieces.
Okay. So typically we like to say we like to borrow, you could borrow the stuff for a month, maybe stretch to 2 months if there's not a huge demand for someone else to get it back. If anybody wants to borrow something, pretty much come to either a meeting or actually what generally works out easier is if you can make it to one of the Tuesday workshops. That gives us a little bit more time to show you the scope and to train you on it. Or if that doesn't work out, contact the board and we may be able to make other arrangements. Again, depending on, and all you need to do is to be a member of the DAS. But again, depending on the complexity and the value of the scope, that obviously will drive the the training that we'll give you before you go off with the equipment.
Yeah.
But yeah, just reach out to a club member, A, if you'd like to borrow something, or B, if you just have some more general questions about any of one of these pieces of equipment.
Yes, sir.
Um,
What did you have?
Here's the point. Could you define two terms, a go-to and a Dob?
Sure,
For
sure.
those.
So this scope up here is a Dobsonian scope. It is so named because it's got this very basic base. It's almost like a cannon. It's very easily pointable just by pulling and pushing on it. You just lean it down, turn it over, and it's very easy to shove to look at what you want to look at. So that's the basic Dob mount.
a Dobsonian telescope named after John Dobson, who
Yes.
invented the style.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And then the other scopes,
Yes.
yes, it is a Newtonian scope. but it's a
Mirror-based.
Dobsonian base.
And the phrase go-to.
Yep.
Yes. So for a go-to scope, that's like this scope, and can you point back here? We got this scope and this scope. The go-to scopes are computerized and they will automatically slew to the objects that you want them to go to by just typing it into the hand paddle. Now, that being noted, you have to align them to the sky first. It's a complicated process so that it knows where it is, so that when you tell it to go to something, then it can actually do it.
And in contrast, the scopes that are not go-to, like our basic Dobbs, you have to basically manually aim and point it at the object that you want to be observing.
And there is one that is different than that. This one right here was
It's in between the two.
kind of in between the two. So you can use it as a Dob, but if you turn on the equipment and you align it to the sky, then it will tell you what you're pointing at.
So it won't go to the object, but it'll help direct you where to push it to.
Yep.
And again, if anyone wanted some extra clarification on what that means, again, you know, we're trying to explain it, but come up and talk to a board member and we can try to explain it a little bit more
Yes, sir.
clearly.
This one, I'm not sure it's the one actually.
Let's
It
push
is-
to.
It is Orion. Let me see. Intelescope. There you go. It's the Intelescope. And we haven't actually tested that part yet. That's on our list of things to do. So that one, we will train you on it after we make sure that that works. That's one thing we haven't gotten to yet. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are these scopes listed somewhere on the DAS website?
They are
And-
indeed. Yes.
Sort of.
And
There's a page.
very good. And additionally, are there nominal specs like focal length, focal ratio and aperture and eyepiece size and so on?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we will revamp that a little bit because since we made that page, there were a couple additions and changes. And so it's not currently up to date, but will be
It's
fairly soon.
80% of it's there.
80% of it.
So if you go to the website and go to I think it's under beginners. And then if you go down under beginners, it's, in fact, we could probably show it.
Members, probably members.
Do a,
But real quick, I
Yeah,
just want to
oh.
mention, we are revamping that part of the site. After we make the videos, there will be YouTube videos up there, as well as instruction manuals. So yeah, if you want to bring that up and share it so that they can see it. Whoops. You're gonna need to share that too, by the way.
yeah, help me out with that, Rob.
So the.
Share, just do this.
Yeah. No, you want to click the big green button.
Ah.
And then select the screen or.
I'll just
select
do
the
this.
web page. Yep, there you go.
So let me start from the,
I think it's under for members.
so here's the club's website. And if you go under for members,
Loaner telescopes.
we have loaner telescopes. And there's the ETX 90. We have the type and size. Ignore this column available. That's something we were playing around with, but
That didn't work out.
yeah,
We're-
there's also a link to the manual if that's available. So like, there's the ETX 90.
That's what I want to have.
Here's the Bushnell. There's one of the Dobbs, another Dobb, the Sun Spotter. That scope actually we're going to be selling because we have the nicer go-to version of a Schmidt scope. But then again, as I said, there's 2 or 3 that are missing from this page, but we will be updating it. And as Rob was saying, we'll be making this list more comprehensive, but in addition, we're making training manuals and videos slowly but surely for all these scopes, and that will be linked in the same page here.
Absolutely.
Great question.
Any other questions?
Is the 12.5 inch still available to members?
Yes, so so great clarification, Jim. So what we were highlighting tonight are the telescopes that a member can take home with them. What we did not highlight tonight are all of the fixed assets of the club that are here at Mount Cuba. That is something we could consider. We've done it a little bit speckled through some of our
You can do it.
past meetings, but we've not really done anything comprehensive like we did tonight. So that's a great suggestion, Jim, that we could do something similar for our, on-site gear. But yeah, the 12.5, just to answer Jim's question, we do have a number of actually generally higher end, nicer, larger telescopes than what we're showing here that are installed fixed on-site here at Mount Cuba that, again, with the appropriate training, club members can have access to. They don't leave the grounds generally because of their size.
And that being said, we're gonna have like special training, almost classes on how to use that gear. We'll go through all the different scopes, explain all the details about the gate, getting onto the
Yeah.
site, and how we can get the approval for you to have the gate code and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's a much bigger deal.
It's a-
That's not
it's a
just the
bigger
equipment, that's also
Yeah.
the facilities and everything
Yeah.
else.
And the rules that you have to follow when you do that. So that again will be upcoming at a later meeting, not at this one, but yeah.
Great question. Any other questions on Zoom or in person? And I'll just say, if anybody, if anyone here and present would like to borrow one of these tonight, you're again more than welcome to. It would save us the trouble of having to lug it back down into the storage room.
Yeah.
But all joking aside, actually, I'll wrap things up by saying, Rob, pardon me, Rob and Ryan are going to do some actually additional videos since we've got all this gear lined up, but that shouldn't take too long. And after that, if we do have a couple of people that can help us lug the stuff back into the storage room, that would be super. And if you're feeling a little tired or you need some energy to help you lug all that stuff, Chris Horrocks tonight was very awesome in providing our refreshments. So there are refreshments provided. And finally, as if all that going on isn't enough, I believe it is clear out. So if someone would like to lead opening up one of the club's telescopes outside, that would be cool as well. It is clear. It is cold though. It might be in the 40s. But so if someone would like to lead the charge on opening up one or more of the club's telescopes, go for it. I'll probably be working on returning all this gear here. But again, if someone would like to help out. So that being said, that wraps up the meeting. Again, I'd like to thank everyone. And again, thanks to Lynn and Rob for their great presentations. And again, everyone, as usual, keep an eye on the groups.io. We'll see you at the next November meeting. And in between then, hopefully see you at our astronomy workshops every Tuesday night. Again, thank you everybody for attending and we'll see you all soon.
Great. Thank you.
All right, and just hit stop and that'll do the
Stop
recording, right?
Yep.
Stop share and then end. Oh, just hit.